What if I told you that one of America's most beloved TV couples almost didn't make it? Not because of scandal, not because of fame, but because of a single, quiet sacrifice that nearly broke them and then saved everything. Before the morning smiles, before the red carpets, before the applause and the laughter that fills millions of living rooms every single day, Ripa and Mark Consuelos stood at a crossroads that no camera ever captured. A moment so personal, so risky, that saying yes meant giving up comfort, certainty, and even parts of themselves they weren't sure they'd ever get back. And here's the surprising part. It wasn't a career move. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't money. It was a choice about love, loyalty, and who would step into the shadow so the other could stand in the light. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you may look at your own sacrifices, especially the quiet ones, very differently. Ripa and Mark Consuelos didn't start as America's sweethearts. They started as two hungry young actors on the set of All My Children in the mid-1990s, both ambitious, both talented, and both absolutely certain that their moment was coming. Kelly was sharp, fast, and unforgettable. Mark was magnetic, disciplined, and driven. Together, they were electric, but electricity can power a home or burn it down. When they eloped in 1996, it wasn't glamorous. No magazine covers. No celebrity blessing. Just two people making a bold leap into the unknown. They were young, in love, and completely unprepared for what success would demand of them. Because when one dream starts to rise, another often has to bend. And at first, it was Kelly's dream that exploded. In 2001, Ripa got the call, the kind of call that changes the trajectory of a life. She was offered a co-hosting role on Live, a daytime television institution watched faithfully by millions, especially Americans over 50 who welcomed Kelly into their homes like family. What looked like overnight success was anything but. The hours were brutal. The scrutiny was relentless. And suddenly, Kelly wasn't just an actress. She was a daily presence in America's routine. Mark watched it happen in real time. And here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Because while Kelly's star was rising, Mark's was quietly dimming. Not because he lacked talent, not because he stopped trying, but because someone had to hold the family together. And that someone was him. This is the part of the story most people never hear. Mark Consuelos made a decision that many men, especially ambitious men, struggled to admit out loud. He stepped back. He adjusted his career. He said no to roles. He became the parent who rearranged schedules. The one who waited. The one who supported from the sidelines. And while Kelly thrived on screen, Mark absorbed the quiet weight of being the spouse of. For years. Let that sink in. In an industry that measures worth by visibility, Mark chose invisibility, so their family could survive the pressure of fame. But here's the cliffhanger. Sacrifice doesn't come without resentment, and resentment doesn't stay silent forever. There were moments, long, unspoken moments, when the imbalance hurt. Mark has admitted, with remarkable honesty, that watching Kelly's success, while his own stalled, was emotionally challenging. Not because he wasn't proud, but because identity is fragile, especially when the world stops asking your name. Kelly felt it too. She's spoken openly about the guilt, the fear, the worry that her success came at the cost of her marriage, that the very thing providing stability could also quietly pull them apart. And here's the surprising truth. They didn't fix it with grand gestures. They didn't fix it with therapy buzzwords. They fixed it with brutal honesty. And one radical rule. Kelly and Mark made a promise that many couples avoid. They would never prioritize comfort over connection. They fought, openly, honestly, and without pretending everything was fine. They acknowledged resentment before it hardened into bitterness. They treated their marriage not as a fairy tale, but as a living, demanding responsibility. Kelly once said something profound. Marriage isn't a romance. It's a discipline. And discipline is built through sacrifice. But the story doesn't end with Mark staying in the background. Because just when it seemed like this sacrifice would define him forever, everything changed again. Years later, Mark Consuelos stepped back into the spotlight, not as a supporting character, but as a force in his own right. Roles returned, confidence returned, and eventually something extraordinary happened. He didn't just reclaim his career. He joined Kelly on her stage, side by side, equal, visible. When Mark became Kelly's co-host on Live, it wasn't a publicity stunt. It was the full-circle moment of a sacrifice finally acknowledged. The man who once stepped aside was now standing front and center, not because he demanded it, but because the marriage had made space for both to rise. And that's the lesson most people miss. For those watching in their 60s, who've lived through decades of compromise, love, disappointment, and resilience, this story hits differently. You know the truth. You know that real love isn't built in highlight reels. It's built in carpool lines, in missed opportunities, in staying when leaving would be easier. Kelly and Mark's story isn't about fame. It's about timing. It's about patience. It's about trusting that sacrifice, when rooted in love, doesn't erase you. It reshapes you. And here's the final cliffhanger.